What's up, my Yugi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to, I guess, this isn't really casual Friday. I just don't want to go to work and get out of bed Monday. You may have noticed, I posted absolutely nothing in this last week, and I kind of look like a caveman now, and that is generally attributable to the fact that I had a wildly stressful week last week that involved having three papers essentially due on the same day for one class, along with an exam for another class, a lab for another class, and two article readings due. And over the course of the week, I think until Friday, I spent maybe 5 hours doing things that weren't school or sleeping. It was just a crazy week. So I did not get to any videos this last week. I am preparing for regionals this week. And so I may make a couple of videos having to do with that and having to do with how I prepare for regionals, because that's going along with the kind of skill theme I've been kind of building toward over the last couple of weeks. But this is going to have been a couple of weeks where it kind of looked like I dropped off the face of the planet, and it's not because I just totally abandoned the whole bringing back this YouTube channel thing. It's mostly because I've been ridiculously busy and am focused on other things for the most part, and this will ease up a lot after regionals, and since this research proposal is now over, and I now get to study into the wonders of why we're not doing anything about climate change. Yay. So I want to get to your Q&A, and I'm going to try and make this fairly quick because I've had a lot of really long videos recently, and I don't have a huge amount of time to edit videos today. So I am going to try and cover as many questions as possible, as in-depth as possible, but bear with me. So we'll start with Destroyer831642, who asks for any good deck building tips for Cardians. I haven't put a lot of thought into Cardians. Basically, what I saw is that they have a really powerful boss monster, and their way of getting there is super vulnerable, and they don't have the moves to get to it. Like, they can. It's not like the archetype is incapable of making their best cards and their best plays happen. It's just that it is not comparable to anything that is effective in the meta right now. Of course, there is the possibility that you could make this deck and it could do fairly well at locals, but I haven't paid a huge amount of attention to it because I've been really trying to steep myself in the competitive game, and they just don't have the kind of moves that boss monster based decks such as ABC do. Where ABC has the benefit that even though it's a boss monster deck, it is also a boss monster deck whose strategy is not hurt by disruption that much. You have to banish their cards, you have to set their cards face down, you have to shuffle them into the deck before the play is really stopped at all. And this is not true of Cardians. Cardians have a very vulnerable strategy. So I do not, off the top of my head, have any deck tips for Cardians because I have not been really anticipating playing around them. Lucid Owl asks, what's the best beginner deck? I was thinking Teller Knights since they're not combo heavy. Well, that really depends. If you're talking about like actual beginners, like people who have never seen a trading card game in their life, I would start them with like an old school 2-4-6 deck. The 2-4-6 decks are like, you know, your level 2 just flip to destroy a monster things, and then your 4s are your level 4 beat sticks, like Gemini Elf and like Gene Warp Warwolf, and then your 6s are like Summon Skull and things like that. Which have 2,500 attack and are level 6, and you can and that's a very, very basic type of deck that you can play around with the build of, that allows you to teach your friends how to play the game. If you want to get a person playing more competitively, playing more on the level of what the real world looks like, I would start them with that, if they haven't played the game before, and then I would move into Goat Control is a really good one for teaching people because it teaches people about the salt of all the bullshit that is in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's also very good because it uses a lot of the base mechanics, but with a lot more of that like deep strategic thinking that you need in order to become better at the real world, the modern meta. And then if you're wanting to teach a person to become more competitive in Yu-Gi-Oh!, I would say usually you want to start a person with a deck that is a combination of having combos, of having an importance to interaction, because that's really necessary for teaching people how to play the game. Because if you don't know how interactions work, if you aren't familiar with the concept of cards leading into other cards leading into other cards leading into plays, then you are not going to be able to do very well getting into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! However, it is also not good to like really overload them with combos. I would say a person just getting into the competitive game, Teller Knights may be a good idea. I would say like BAPK or PK Fire is a great one, since it requires a lot of interactions, and they're not complex interactions, but they require a player to build skill in understanding how to best order interactions, how to respond to opponents' plays. Really, the biggest thing about getting better at the game, and I'm going to be talking about this in the near future, is having experience with the game, understanding your deck, your potential opponent's decks, and what makes cards good and bad. So I'm going to move on. Ben Essex asks, Keynes or Smith? I um I am a huge classical liberal, which is funny because I have absolutely no no patience for modern libertarians. And this comes from a place of A, classical liberalism, and B, understanding of economics that did not come from the Chicago school or the Austrian school, which basically says that you need some public works and some public regulation to avoid market power, because market power exists in a free market system, and market power is similar to the concentration of power within a government. But that I won't get into that. The point being, I'm a really big fan of Smith. I am a big classical liberal in terms of like political idealism. I would say that like there are definitely updates to classical liberalism that are very, very important. For instance, the labor theory of value was very, very short-sighted, and is one of the big reasons why I think Karl Marx had no idea how the economy worked. Um, but I think that if I were to choose between Keynes and Smith, Keynes being kind of an interventionist, and I don't like to use that term lightly, because like there are a lot of, like I said, internet libertarians who like to use that word to describe like any government, but the purpose of Keynes's theory was to say that there is an important place for government to direct the economy. And I just don't think that the government has the mechanics to direct an economy. I think that my kind of catchphrase is that the government is big, dumb, and slow, which, is good for some things because it means the preservation of rights and things like that, but it's really bad for trying to keep up with something as complicated as the United States economy or the global economy or the EU's economy. I just think that the government will not be able to make the right decisions or the best, most efficient decisions as quickly as they would need to do in order to direct the economy efficiently. And so I am not a big fan of John Maynard Keynes. Also, he was kind of a dickweed. Jinzo94 asks, do you own Mermail in its full max rarity glory? Actually, my Mermail deck, the one I have sitting around, I built over like 2 years. And so I built it piece by piece, and so it is not only not max rarity, it is also a bunch of different rarities. It would just absolutely destroy somebody with OCD. Dejan, I am really bad at pronouncing people's names. 543 asks, my question is Lightsworn still viable? Also, is Chain Beat still viable? Lightsworn is fairly viable. It's a good rogue deck. Mostly the reason why we don't see it any more than we do is because Minerva is a prize card, and it's really the most important card in the deck right now. And Chain Beat is definitely very, very viable with the existence of Card of Demise. I haven't seen it played yet because I think that there are probably better Demise-based decks out there, but it's definitely viable, and it is unique in the world of Demise-based decks, and it can also make very, very effective use of Pot of Desires. In a way that other Demise decks cannot do. Cody Jenkins asks, what are your thoughts on generic draw powers such as Upstart Goblin, Allure of Darkness, and Pot of Desires in the game? Cody Jenkins goes on to say that he thinks that it is fairly healthy and generally good in the game because it allows decks that wouldn't be able to compete otherwise to compete. And I kind of agree with that. I think that some like very, very minor generic draw support is very, very good. I think that Pot of Desires, while making for a format that can be more diverse, I don't like it being in the game. I like draw power requiring a little bit of thought, which is why I like semi-generic. draw power, like Allure of Darkness. Allure of Darkness is a great example. Or Sacred Sword of the Seven Stars. These are things that can be run in multiple decks, but you have to choose very carefully which decks you put them into. You have to really understand your deck theory in order to choose the right draw power with these kind of things. And so I do really enjoy having draw support in the game that can be run in multiple different decks, and having every deck be able to run a certain kind of draw support for itself. But I would rather they have to put some thought into which draw power that they use, so that it isn't just, wow, well, Desires works, so I might as well use that. Celsi Mudo asks, what do you think is the most underrated deck this format, and also what deck do you think is not as good as people think? Let's see, underrated decks this format. I mean, I think Magispectors are very, very respected as a deck. I think that they are highly underrated for the coming format. And that's mostly because they're the only deck in the meta right now that has a decent turn 2 against ABC. Because of the fact that ABC Buster Dragon cannot target Magispector monsters. And so when you do your Ties of the Brethren thing, they can only really get rid of one of your back row, or one of your pendulum scales, or something like that. And so I think that it has a lot of power to beat ABC. I think going into the future, it's really tough to tell what decks are underrated. Because we really haven't seen things that have decent matchups against things like Tree Toad and ABC that aren't necessarily talked about in the game right now. As far as overrated decks, honestly, I think Water is a severely overrated deck. And this is coming from a person who absolutely loves the deck. I think that it's terrible, this format. I think that it is a very powerful deck. I think that it's very flexible. I think the problem is that it's facing a lot of decks that can do the same thing and place back row. This is a very setup-heavy format, and Mermails do not do well in a setup-heavy format. They have especially a really god-awful ABC matchup, because Dragon Buster can do the tag out thing, so it's very difficult for them to OTK if they don't draw into a Kaiju, and because they can draw into so much back row, and back row really, really hurts the deck. And so I would say that Water is a highly overrated deck right now. I think that Metal Foes are probably going to have a much worse ABC matchup than people would like them to have, and so that's probably going to be it's going to show itself off as being a kind of more vulnerable than we thought it was in the past, especially since ABC can draw into like 20 Solemn Strikes on turn 1. Click 3D Click asks, what's the best deck that features a lot of cute girls right now? I don't know. I can't think of anything that's currently in the meta that features any attractive women. Like cute girls, if we're thinking like adorable, I guess Madolche is the best? I don't know, that's a weird question. One Fire Up that asks, what do you think of pure kaijus or kaijus in general? I think kaijus in general are great. They are a very, very game-changing bit of the game, because they allow you to get rid of problem monsters without destroying them, without targeting them, without activating spell cards, and without giving up your normal summon a la Volcanic Queen or Santa Claus. So I think kaijus, in terms of their splash ability, are very good. I think that pure kaijus, however, are very, very underwhelming. And the reason is because for kaijus to be good, they have to have a follow-up play. And a pure kaiju deck's follow-up play is to summon another kaiju. And that is not a particularly overwhelming follow-up play. Because, like, if you're playing against something like Metal Foes, first of all, kaiju are awful against Metal Foes anyway. But if you are playing against something like Metal Foes that's going to have big boards, your kaiju is only going to take out one card on the board. Unless you have Slumber, which is another story. But most decks have some way of wiping the board anyway, so that doesn't make them particularly special. The thing is, you're just going to take out one of their monsters and put a kaiju down, and then you're going to have to, run over their other monsters somehow, and the deck just does not have that kind of contingency. Lick asks, which variant of ABC do you think is the best? I think the rank 4 variant is the best. The really standard variant, and I think it's just because that one is the most consistent. It is most consistently able to put the Buster Dragon on the board, and the most consistent to put back row on the board, and those two things are the most important thing in the deck. I think the rank 5 build is super cool. I like the fact that it gives you like a crazy ass turn 1, But I mean, if you're playing ABC, you're going to have a crazy turn one anyway. It's kind of gilding the lily at that point. Garlic XLR asks, what do you think of semi-limiting? Does putting a card to 2 really do anything in today's game? I think that putting a card to 2 is very, very important. The reason is because in some decks, having the availability of a combo that can recur over and over and over again because of the availability of other combo pieces in your deck, because of these, let's see, I forgot how I began that sentence. The point being, that kind of deck is very, very powerful, and if you get rid of one of their options, it really, really reduces their power. It really reduces their ability to do that kind of recursion, especially if one of their cards can search for itself, or one of their cards can search for a card that searches for itself. If you semi-limit one of those cards, it at least slows down the deck, or if the deck really needs a card to draw for consistency, if you hit a card that the deck cannot search into, then I think semi-limiting is is a good mechanic, and is also good for limiting the prevalence of certain cards in the game, such as back when they semi-limited Solemn Warning. I think that limited its consistency. They then had to limit it further, but I think that it did do something, and if it were for a card that were less game-breaking than Solemn Warning, I think that it would have had more of an effect. So I think that semi-limiting can occasionally do something in today's game. It just has to be very, very well targeted. Team Darkfire X asks, what do you think of the new Tellarknight support, and do you think the new support could bring them back into the meta? I think that the new support, I haven't looked at it a huge amount, but my impression of it when I looked at it was that it just added to something we already had. And if Tellarknights are not doing well in the current meta, they're probably not going to do well in the future meta once the new Tellarknight support is out. But I will have to take a closer look at the Tellarknight support that has recently come out, and I will, I suppose, get back to you on that. Clayfigure7 asks, which YouTuber do you like dislike dueling against? Let's see, I've only ever dueled against one YouTuber, I think. I dueled against, who did I duel against? It was against Speedy Steve 2448, also known as the Synchro Extremist, who absolutely whooped my butt when I bricked twice in a row with Thunder Family. So I think that's the only YouTuber duel I have ever had, now that I think about it. YouTubers I would dislike dueling against. I think that I would dislike dueling against, I mean, I would probably dislike dueling against Kogurasho, which is funny because he's one of my favorite YouTubers, and I love every deck that he makes. It just looks very, very boring to face a lot of those decks because a lot of them are him doing crazy things for like 10 minutes and then winning. So that probably wouldn't be that much fun. And finally, Ghost Trick Knight says, can we get a deck profile from Mermails from you? Potentially. Potentially in the next week or so, I will have a Mermail deck that I think is good enough to give a profile of. I'm really, really focusing on regionals right now. I really like the phrase really, really. Anyway, I'm focusing on regionals right now, and so I haven't had a huge amount of time to think about giving a deck profile for Mermails. But I think that there is a possibility that I could do a Mermail deck profile in the very near future. I will get back to you on that. Oh, it turns out that he wasn't the first question, or the last question. We have Q&A E-Combo asks, what do you think will be the best deck to take advantage of Ties of the Brethren? Easily Magispectors. Magispectors, hands down. Being able to set traps, basically, from your deck, traps and spell cards, in order just to be, it's just so powerful. It's a plus a bajillion for that deck. And I think that it allows you to get the kind of setup that it needs to be very, very competitive in this game and even beat ABC for kind of best deck in the format. I think that Magispectors are very, very powerful, and they are an up-and-coming deck of the format. Maybe they're not the best deck. I may be kind of exaggerating it, but I think that they're very powerful, especially with Ties of the Brethren. Frank King asks, will you be doing a ban list prediction? What decks do you want to die? Honestly, I think that, I mean, also, is there any card that you would like to be removed from the ban list and put to one? Yes. Honestly, I would like to see Zen Mighty come back. It's not a threat to the current meta. You could ban Hunter if you really wanted, but there are better hand loops in the game. And so I'm, like, I don't know why they're so worried about Zen Mighty being in the game. Besides, it allows Mermails to go into Tree Toad. Also, let's see. I think as far as decks I'd like to see die, I am going to be really happy to see ABC go. They're probably not going to go right away. The other thing is that I don't know when Konami is going to make a new ban list, so that makes doing ban list predictions fairly difficult. I think that Konami is also going to try and absolutely destroy BA this time, because Konami, let's face it, just does, like, there are decks that it lets go too many times and then it destroys them. See Infernity. And then also, what do you think of, what are your thoughts on Legendary Deck 2 reprints? I don't really have any thoughts. They're probably good for people who didn't already have the cards and not good for people who had the cards. I pulled a Blackstone of Legend randomly, and I was kind of excited that that was a pricey card, but like then it got hit by the Legendary Deck 2 reprint, and then it's less expensive now. So that kind of sucks for me, but like other than that, I have very little opinion on the subject because I just don't have the cards and I'm not looking to make those decks. The Divergency asks thoughts on the new card coming out, Switch Hero. Switch Hero has the potential to be really nutty. My biggest issue with it is the fact that it's a trap card, which means that its main purpose is going to be disruption, which means that when you are playing it, you are going to be either having to not set up your board in order to disrupt your opponent's plays, or you are going to have to give your opponent an already established board in order to disrupt their plays, which I think is not very good. And so it's going to have to be in a very, very targeted deck, and you're going to have to focus a lot on it because it requires the ability to manipulate the number of cards on the field at any given moment. And I think that there is not a build currently equipped to deal with that hurdle. And so I think that it has the potential to be really ridiculously good, but I just don't think it's going to be really ridiculously good as soon as it comes out. Anyway, so that is my Q&A for today. I tried to do it as quickly as possible, but it turned out once again to be a 20-minute video. I may be able to edit this down, but I have to get ready for class. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And if you have any questions for the next Casual Friday or Q&A Monday, I don't know which it's going to be this week because I am actually going to be heading to regionals right after class on Friday. So if, let's see, so yeah, where was I? Oh yeah, leaving your questions in the comment section below. I'll try to get to them in my next Q&A video. And meanwhile, I hope you guys like this video. If you wait, I did that already. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See y'all.